Today we'll be covering the patch notes for the March 2023 update of World of Warships Legends. Drops on Monday, March 6, 2023 at these various times here. There's not a whole lot to this update, I suppose, so we'll also be taking a look at the extensive balance changes, but I don't want to waste too much time on preamble, so let's get right to it and start off with the reward for the upcoming campaign. Tier 8 French cruiser Carno, a well-protected, hard-hitting, and speedy cruiser. You can expect the usual framework, 100 milestones for the campaign to get it, over 5 weeks, heroic effort missions and catch-up mechanic in place, and a battle prowess mission for the Admiralty backing owners to earn even more renown. Here's a detailed breakdown of the campaign, but the important part is, of course, the ship, which, I suppose, thankfully, is not a battleship, because we've seen a lot of those, including the Pommern last time, which I found underwhelming, but instead a cruiser, albeit I think this is a heavy sort of super cruiser, which I'm not sure that people are necessarily asking for more of those at the high tier, but hopefully an interesting experience. Okay, moving on, we have the return of everybody's favorite game mode, Racing Legends. Excuse my hesitation in claiming that it's everybody's favorite game mode. You'll have to let me know in the comments, but there are 3 week-long seasons with playoffs and leaderboards and plenty of time to enjoy the high-octane race to first place. I suppose, if you are interested in this mode, there is going to be a dedicated blog post that'll give us more details. But know that it's coming, and it's probably coming with some unique skins. You can sort of see some here in the artwork. Anyway, moving on to another section that'll have to be explained more in depth a little bit later in yet another dedicated blog post is St. Patrick's Day stuff for 2023. We'll be getting a new ship, Tier 7 Celtic. No idea what that will be. We'll also be getting a commander guise named Kara, or maybe Kara McMordoff, to go along with Brady McMordoff, who we already have. Pot of gold crates are coming back. More details, March 13th. Tier 8. We're getting a bunch of new Tier 8 researchable tech tree ships, starting with the Minnesota, which should follow the Kansas on the alternate American battleship tech tree line. The Seattle, which is interesting. I'm not sure what line would that be put on then? The Cleveland line? The Kitakazi, which I'm very excited about. That'll be following the Akizuki. The Drake, which I think is a pretty good... I think this is when the British heavy cruisers start to get really good on the PC tech tree, or at least get decent. I don't know. In any case, it'll follow the Albemarle at Tier 8. And finally, the Pan-Asian destroyer Chungmu, which I expect will be a huge upgrade over the Tier 7 Xian Yang, despite the fact that some of my colleagues think that destroyer is like the best at Tier 7. I just don't see the attraction, but I'm looking forward to the Chungmu. And of course, the Pan-Asian cruiser line that we had in early access this past update now becomes fully researchable. We're going to get some more seasons of ranked battles with high-tier ships, and again, this will be in a special blog post, but more ranked battles this season, who knows what that'll be about. The most interesting things, I just gave a little spoiler there, the most interesting things in this update are here, in this section of the patch notes. The debut of Pan America, our first Pan-American battleship, the Atlantico, arrives as a Tier 7 premium battleship with powerful, accurate, and long-range secondaries, plus AP-only main battery guns. It's going to be available in the store on the first day of the update, and it is going to come with not a battleship-specific, but a universal Pan-American commander, Pedro Lima Santos. He will be added to your account automatically if you buy this ship, and apparently a Pan-Asian or a Pan-American battleship commander will arrive in a future update. Hopefully I didn't say debut of Pan Asia. I meant Pan America. This is a Pan American battleship. I think it's maybe it's Brazilian. I'm not entirely sure, but should be interesting. And after that, we have something I've been waiting for ever since the German battle cruiser line debuted in Legends months or a year ago. I don't know how long it's been at this point, but the Schlieffen is coming to the Bureau as a researchable project. You'll have to buy the project in the store either for credits or doubloons. I highly recommend you do, because the Schlieffen has the potential to be the most fun ship in this game. It is one of my favorite ships to play on World of Warships PC, so I'm very much looking forward to that. We'll go over the balance changes now at this point, I suppose, because all that's left in the patch notes are bug fixes, although there is a section down here about adding a sap shell trait. I think that's to the descriptions of the Italian cruisers. And then there's some map changes to a couple of the existing maps, which include new scenarios. That language is kind of vague, not sure exactly what it means. But also a National Plus voiceover mod, or mode rather, is coming to the game, which means now you can have all your commanders speak in their native tongues, but you can also hear all the chittering weebery in the background from all the collaboration commanders, the Azerlane, and all that stuff. So if that floats your boat, congratulations. I will be sure not to select this one. Sorry to disappoint you for those of you who enjoy watching my streams and want to hear that stuff, but I don't. And then Winter Shards, if you still got those, you'll get credits for them. Anyway, on to the balance changes, and this is interesting. Now, this is for the March 2023 update of World of Warships Legends, and frankly, there's a lot to dig into here. They're making a pass on a couple of Tier 8 ships here, and, well, let's just get into it. The Main, I think everybody regards it as fairly underwhelming. The patch notes, or the Ministry of Balance, says as much, so they're just doing a bunch of stuff to it. They're buffing the HP a lot, well, by a couple thousand, but they're also... So the HP in any given ship is distributed. That is not a picture of the Main. The HP of any ship is distributed across certain parts of the hull. The bow has a set amount of HP, the casemate, the stern, all that stuff, right? And of course, if you get hit a lot in the bow, or not in the bow, but in the superstructure of things like the American battleships, you take a lot of damage. That is probably going to be mitigated by this buff, because as you can see, they're reducing the superstructure HP significantly. Like, very significantly. It's going from 10,000 to 3,300. So this looks like it'll be an interesting survivability buff to the Main, although I'm not convinced that this is necessarily the buff the ship needed in order to become effective, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, moving on, Tier 8 Ibuki and Ibuki B. It's also getting a buff to its HE shell damage, its HP shell damage, and its reload is being decreased slightly. And here is where we approach the comedy aspect of these balance changes. For some reason, the Colbert, which I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think this ship has the highest theoretical HE and AP DPM in the entire game, but apparently, while this awesome firepower constitutes a tremendous ship in the right hands, poor little Colbert has poor battle impact and poor win rate, and somehow her damage output is lacking, I suppose, in all but the most experienced players' hands, as these patch notes say. So as a consequence, because apparently a sizable section of the player base is not able to make this ship work, the solution is apparently to take the ship with the highest DPM in the game and then buff the DPM and also give it an improved repair party. Keep in mind, it also has 32mm armor plating, which is iffy, not exactly the most reliable if anybody who has figured out to aim at any place other than directly at your bow is shooting at you. But this makes no sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. This is crazy. It may be true that this ship has, what do you call it, a high skill floor, and you need to be fairly good at the game in order to make it work. But I don't think it's a good idea to take the ship with the highest DPM and buff the DPM. That's all I'll say on the Colbert. A bit of a baffling choice. Anyway, moving on, a good change. Improved German secondary guns. Finally, the Germans are going to have the proper quarter HE penetration values, and this is going to largely impact the German battleships and battle cruisers from tier 6 to legendary tier. So, slowly, over time, secondaries are becoming more and more effective, which is a thing that I think I appreciate. And then on to the nerfs. I think everybody could have predicted this was coming, but Prinz Ruprecht is getting nerfed. They're reducing the main battery reload time from 30 to 32 or increasing rather from 30 to 32 seconds, and they're also increasing the secondary gun reload time because, contrary to what some people might tell you, these secondaries are fantastic and the DPM is kind of scary, so they're nerfing that. They're also doing the same to Prinz Heinrich, and Delny, the most effective destroyer at tier 8, is getting hit with, I think, the second nerf in its lifetime. Mostly, the nerf comes to the torpedoes, which ultimately don't really matter, at least I don't think they do, if you're playing the destroyer as intended, but they are also decreasing rather, the detectability of the torpedoes to compensate for the nerfs. The nerfs are to alpha damage, to reload time, and also to speed. Still, these are no nerfs to range, so they're still going to have their same range, and, I mean, the ship was never about the torpedoes. August von Parzival, it is getting nerfs, as I suppose it should. It's one of the more irritating carriers with its ability to citadel you from the sky, and no counterplay yet for that until we can start angling our decks against the sky, but Parzival's getting nerfed. Not too sad about that. And then finally, I think we're going to end this section of the buffs and the nerfs with some changes to commander skills. Couple interesting ones. The base trait of the universal French commander Louis du Fournay is being buffed. It gives you more HE shell damage. The buff is going from 4% to 6%. Emile, one of the French battleship commanders, the brawler type one, his base trait, which increases the skill of battleships, is getting buffed. And this, I love to see this, the mortar skill, which is dedicated to the gunboating style of play, is getting an increased effectiveness. They are buffing the maximum damage modifier when you have the skill fully maxed from 10% to 13%. And I do run this skill on a couple of my destroyers. I think the Elbing, and if I'm using Trubetskoy on the Khabarovsk, I'd put it on there too, the Russians, that kind of thing. So this is nice. This will be a nice little improvement for those gunboat type destroyers. And then I actually don't know what this skill Cloudy Days even is. It's hard to keep track of the skills in this game sometimes, but it is getting a buff and a nerf at the same time. The engine boost cooldown time is being reduced, but the smokescreen, dispersion, and deployment time are being improved. Then the reaching out skill, which I think is a skill that's only available on the universal commander. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. The way that skills work in this game, it's impossible for me to remember them by these names sometimes. But anyway, this skill, we've changed this skill to have greater focus and application for destroyers. Music to my ears. The auxiliary buff to secondary battery range has been replaced with a buff to destroyer main battery reload. The skills icon has also been updated to reflect this change, previously, this skill increased main battery and secondary battery range by 8%, and it will apparently, reaching out will now increase main battery range by 8% and reduce main battery reload. Okay, so the percentage is still staying the same. I'm not sure why they have stated this twice. That's kind of confusing wording, isn't it? Or am I just illiterate? Anyway, instead of increasing secondary range, it will increase or decrease the main battery reload on destroyers. And then there's a couple nerfs to a couple of these commander base traits, specifically on Aboya now, the French DD commander who buffs HE shell damage. That's getting nerfed, and everybody knows that the most valuable part of the perceptive skill is its ability to show you the direction of the nearest ship, so the modifier to incoming damage to your destroyer is being nerfed, which I suppose makes sense. Likewise, the buff to turret traverse speed for twist and track on destroyer guns is being reduced, which I understand if the idea is that only the American destroyers are maybe using this skill, but this is gonna kind of hurt some of the other destroyers, like maybe the lower tier Russian ones, say, who have exceptionally poor turret traverse and really need to use this skill specifically for that reason that it buffs the turret traverse. Kinda not a fan of that one. Perceptive, I understand. This one, not so much. And then finally, go all out. The detectability modifier, which frankly was outrageous, is being nerfed. And to compensate that, the penalty to the cooldown for the engine boost is being reduced as well. So a lot of interesting balancing changes coming to this update. Frankly, I feel like all of this is a little bit more interesting than the actual content of the update itself, but let me know what you think in the comments. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.